Welcome to this first episode of this channel. I've decided to establish this channel because I think there's a lot of confusion about addiction. I've personally had my own journey with addiction, which I'm going to share with you today. And I've also helped thousands of people over the last 15 years, actually longer than 15 years now, specialising in addiction recovery. But the thing that really stood out to me as to why we need to have this channel is because the conventional methods have been failing. They've been failing everybody, and there doesn't seem to be any clear alternative. You end up having this confusion about how you should quit, what you should do, and usually that ends up at some point using willpower and having this inner mental conflict, which actually, from my point of view now, is detrimental. It's the opposite of what we should be doing. So today I'm going to share my personal journey, how really being a truth seeker, trying to find out the truth of addiction has really led to me ending my addiction and helping others. So I'd like to show you a new way of understanding addiction. And this is an opportunity for deep transformation, because addiction is not separate from our total being. It's there for a reason. And once we understand and listen to what addiction is, in a sense, showing us, then we see it as an opportunity, and it ceases to be a waste of time and a hindrance in our life. It becomes actually the doorway to a path where you gain a whole new state of being and a whole new view of yourself that you never would have had if addiction wasn't in your life. Now, of course, this assumes that you're looking at it from the point of view that I'm looking at addiction. And I really don't mean to belittle anyone's experience. I know the suffering that addiction can cause, and I know the trap and the endless cycle of just being out of control and it running your life. I'm not trying to belittle that at all, but I would like to introduce you to a new way that I've discovered and gradually grown in understanding over the last 15 years. So, and I'll use my example, my journey, as really the way to explain this method, or at least introduce it to you. So, I was thinking when I was preparing for this episode and realizing that I had what we might call conventional addiction, as in daily use of, some substance for probably 15 to 20 years of my life, if you add all the periods up. I mean, it started with smoking cigarettes at school, and I was at boarding school, and that became a daily habit. I didn't really think anything of it. You're young then, and you don't. But then, leaving school, that continued. That continued until I was 30. I only quit because I just knew that I couldn't be an acupuncturist and practice and still be a smoker. But during that period, prior to that, I also smoked dope, marijuana, on a daily basis for years. And then later on in my life, it just kind of crept up on me, I became addicted to alcohol. And obviously there were other substances along the way, but I can't really say that I was on a daily basis addicted to them. But with each of those addictions, trying to end those addictions was a real struggle. And discovering that I couldn't end the addiction just using my own choice was a real shock. and I'm sure you've been through that. And back in the day, I didn't know any different than I suppose anybody else, and I, really majorly quit with willpower, but I still had cravings, particularly for the cigarettes and alcohol. I still had cravings for many years, and that just seemed to, in my mind, be normal. I thought that everyone that quit addiction always had cravings, but now the way I look at it now is I realise that we weren't born with cravings. Babies don't have cravings for cigarettes, alcohol, other substances. So that means something's changed in our brain. And when you think about what a real cure would be, it would be your brain going back to normal so that you don't get cravings anymore. But that's not what happens with the conventional methods. Conventional methods, you end up with cravings, don't you? Mostly. And sure, they might diminish in frequency and intensity, but a strong emotional event comes and then, that craving is back with a vengeance. So, and the conventional methods haven't really solved this problem. I'll do another video where I'll go through my thoughts about each of those methods. But for now, let's just acknowledge that the conventional methods haven't really gotten to the truth of why we still get cravings for many, many years. When I remember a lady who she came in with someone else who was being treated by me for addiction, and she was the grandma, and she said that she quit 50 years ago and she still has cravings every day. So that's real suffering. And that's what we've kind of been led to believe is normal, but it's really not from my point of view. So part of that conventional view is, for a long time it was thought that it was just all about the substance. And when the substance left your body, you were no longer addicted because the substance was flushed out of your body. So in most cases, the drug is out of your body in, 10 days to 2 weeks. There might be minuscule traces, but they're not having any impact. And your brain chemistry readjusts quite quickly. So it then really puzzled me because after I quit myself, I went to help others quit, and I didn't really understand that it just isn't all about the drug, because why would someone relapse months or even years after they've quit if it was the drug that was driving that relapse? And if we come back to the fact that there's cravings in someone's mind, those cravings are not being produced by any drug or substance in the system, because that's been flushed out a long time ago. So the drug part of the story is only, it's not the whole understanding. It's part of the understanding, and it's a short-lived part. It's the beginning part. It's not even the biggest part. We now know that there are other factors that actually lead to influence addiction, such as trauma. And most people I speak to on a daily basis, one of the first things that I'm looking for is, when I ask the question, well, has your addiction changed lately? It's usually that there's been some traumatic event or some shock. And if there hasn't been anything lately, I go back to when the addiction started, and usually that was, in most cases, there was something going on there, some unresolved emotional trauma that is keeping the addiction alive. And I'll come back to this in a moment. But in terms of my own journey, in trying to understand this, why do we have a cravings problem, when I was trying to help others quit, I had a client who I'd seen a few months ago. I was sitting in the clinic this evening and the client rang up. I'd finished, no more patients that day. I was there by myself, 7:30 at night. Patient rang up and said that he'd relapsed after not smoking for 3 months. And that suddenly really hit me, that did not make any sense at all, because there was no nicotine in his system. And after I hung up the phone, I looked down at the bin and there was an unopened packet, because people would throw their cigarettes out. There was an unopened packet of cigarettes in the bin. And the thought came into my mind, I could have one of those. And then I realised actually I wanted to have one, and I was thinking that nobody would know. It's an unopened packet. I could just have that. And I realised there and then that I was having a craving. And this is 10 years after I'd had no nicotine in me for 10 years. Suddenly I was having a craving. So I wanted to find out what that craving was. And so I tried to investigate. I tried to find it, but it disappeared very quickly. And I thought, well, that's kind of normal. It just disappears quickly. So, but every time I had another craving, I was on the lookout. I tried to find the craving in my mind. I used my Chinese medicine diagnostic skills. I used my Qigong inner awareness. And every time it just disappeared very quickly, until one day I had the thought, well, what if me trying to find the craving was actually what was somehow influencing it to disappear? So the next time I had a craving, I didn't do anything. I didn't try to investigate. And lo and behold, the craving stayed. And it stayed and it stayed and it stayed until I tried to investigate, and like magic, it just literally disappeared. And at that moment, I realised I had discovered a technique to make the mental cravings disappear. And so that's what I started teaching. And it would take me an hour or so to explain how to do that. And then it would take often quite a few more support phone calls to really coach people as to how to do that properly. And that was quite successful. And that's when I realised that the mental craving was purely a mental phenomenon. And I'll go into the detail of that another time. So my clients and me, because I was also having, mental cravings, even though I wasn't having any substances. So I started to teach this. I used to teach clients every hour. I used to see people one-on-one back then. And when I was teaching the technique, I was actually doing it in my own mind at the same time. And then after quite a while, I started to say to clients, I haven't had a craving in a month myself. And then it was like 2 months, 3 months. And around about the 6-month mark, I realised that, wow, I had cravings for 10 years after I quit, and now I don't have cravings at all. Something's changed in my brain. And I thought that it must have been the repetition from the technique that had somehow retrained my brain. And so that's what I was teaching at the time. But I wanted to understand how this worked. So I went back into, my neuroscience. I did a Bachelor of Applied Science. We had Western Medical Sciences in that degree when I learnt Chinese medicine. So I used that as a starting point, and I delved back into neuroscience. And what I discovered was that there's the two main systems that are keeping, in a sense, triggering cravings are the fight or flight system and the reward system, and the dopamine pathway in the pleasure center, the nucleus accumbens. And And I realised that the craving is really kind of a phenomenon that appears in our mind when that dopamine hits the pleasure center. Um, so, and that the technique that I discovered in some way neutralised that dopamine hit. Now, of course, discovering that the subconscious was involved, as in the fight or flight system and the reward system, they're, deep, what we call the hindbrain parts of our brain, they're the deep subconscious reactions, automatic reactions. That sent me down a whole nother pathway because I was starting to see that I could teach the technique to people, but they would have to keep repeating the technique over and over for really kind of forever, because I think the reason why my mind transformed so quickly was because I was doing it every hour. Well, people aren't doing the technique every hour after they've quit their addiction. They're doing it once in a while when they get a craving. So, and then a strong emotional event would occur and the craving would come on very strong, and then they'd be vulnerable to relapse and they'd often, in that kind of shock, fight or flight type environment, they would forget to do the technique. So I realised that the technique alone wasn't enough. And what was going on was this deeper, unresolved, emotional, often trauma reactions that were being triggered by the present day circumstance, and that the subconscious had kept the addiction pathway kind of on hand, let's say dormant, ready for when it was needed. And this caused me to really rethink what addiction really is. You see, the conventional view, I'm sure you know, is that it's just a bad choice. Someone's making a bad decision, and they're too weak to stop themselves from making that bad decision, and so they're essentially 100% responsible for their addiction. And this has given people with addiction a very bad reputation, very unfairly, I think, and it's really created a lot of shame, a lot of harm, a lot of suffering. And I actually think it's very wrong, because it's not factoring in how powerful the subconscious is. And if we think about what we know about the subconscious, everything that we are not aware of consciously right now, such as our breathing, heart rate, even the feeling of me sitting in the chair, every time I adjust myself, it's because I want to get more comfortable. The subconscious is monitoring my state of being moment to moment. And, if I have an itch, then I scratch that itch. I wasn't aware of it until somehow I became aware of it, and the subconscious was aware of it. So with breathing, it's something it just happens automatically, but we can increase our awareness and become aware of it, and then we can have choice around it. So, but in terms of fight or flight, in terms of reward like cravings, pleasure, these two systems are designed to take over, particularly in an emergency. So, because that's what's going to save us from the danger. Either we fight the danger to destroy the danger, or we run away from the danger, that's the flight. And you can also freeze, that's hiding. It's kind of a bit like flight, but it's just hiding to get away from the danger. So, and this is designed to take over from the frontal cortex, the decision making, well, the complex decision making. So it's designed to take over, and that's what's happening when we get addiction triggered. You'll notice addiction is, let's say someone has a strong emotional event. Now that in itself might trigger also past trauma and make it amplified, so even stronger. And then you'll get this fight or flight reaction. So it'll be fight or flight's designed to get rid of pain and suffering. So and then the reward system, the other side, is designed to get pleasure. So it's two systems working together. So usually if you think about most addictions, they're designed to change your state. Well, not designed, they just happen to change your state of being very quickly. Let's take alcohol, for example. That's easy. You have a drink and very quickly your whole physical and mental state of being will relax and have some pleasure, and you'll even forget about some worries. You just forget about them temporarily. So that's doing the job that the subconscious wants, to get away from the pain and give you pleasure. If you think about, let's say social media addiction or gaming addiction, what's happening there? It's almost like we go into this bubble world where we forget about the rest of our life, forget about, we might be bored, we might have, things that we need to do or solve, or we might be procrastinating, whatever. And that somehow hypnotic scrolling just takes all that away. Even, smoking a cigarette, what ends up happening is you end up, often people smoke when they're bored or when they're agitated. Someone will go outside, have a smoke, have a think. And some other addictions are more focused on pleasure. So it's these real primitive drives that are, I think, the real power behind addiction. Now, and if we extend this definition, we can see that so much of our daily activity is driven by either trying to get away from pain or have pleasure. Even putting on a jacket if you're cold is getting away from pain and having the pleasure of warmth. Having food is the same. Now, I'm not saying these, are, detrimental activities. They're not, but they're operating out of the same drive, which is to get away from pain and to have some pleasure. So much of our activity is subconsciously driven like this. And like I said before, the subconscious is designed to take over from our conscious mind if our conscious mind isn't, regulating these needs, it isn't supplying a solution to these needs. So once I understood all this, I then became aware that our state of being is very important in terms of how much addiction we have in our life. So, for example, actually I spoke to someone yesterday, and this person is addicted to alcohol, needs to drink alcohol every day. But they told me about a time when they went on holiday very recently, and they just had so content, so just at peace. They couldn't explain why they didn't drink that much. They had a couple of drinks, but they just didn't need to keep going like normal so that they, got really, really drunk. That just didn't happen because the state of being was much more content, less stressful. So that's just one example. So if you think about contentment, it's a very deeply pleasurable state. And alongside contentment is often peace. And peace is really an absence of any pain and suffering, isn't it? At peace. And you'll notice that when someone's able to access a state of deeper peace and contentment, what will end up happening is they won't need to have much to make things better, including their addictions. Everything becomes so much more of a free choice. And that's certainly been my case, because as I began to understand this, I began to, in a sense, evolve and practice ways of accessing a deeper, what I discovered, a deeper state within me, which is within us all, which is and part of our natural state, our core being. If we, the more that we, in a sense, let go and not strip away, but allow ourselves to enter into more of what we are on a feeling level, and less of what we think we are, and just experience how we are right now. If we're able to do that, you start to experience a natural peace, a natural contentment. And that's a place where you really don't need addiction. Addiction literally falls away. In fact, this is what happens with my clients. We say, don't fight the addiction. Seek the truth of your own state. Now, and then as you start to experience that, the subconscious also experiences that and realizes that there is no pain there. And there's even a deep pleasure, subtle, deep pleasure, and it doesn't push the addiction. Because addiction, the subconscious doesn't have a vested interest in pushing the addiction. It's just a means to an end for the subconscious. So it really lets it go if it's not needed. And people are so surprised that, going from drinking a litre of vodka a day to, really not needing it it seems miraculous, but it's actually because the subconscious is not needing to step in and take charge. So the pathway to opening up this ability that we have is for the conscious mind to open up to greater awareness. Because, like I said before, the subconscious is taking care of everything that we're not aware of right now in terms of our, mind-body regulation. And so if we can use our conscious mind, which we can, to open up to the truth of what's happening now, then at some point we will discover the truth of what that is, what we are, and more, and the subconscious will back off and it's not needed, so it just lets go of these automatic reactions like addiction, like impatience, like anger. All of these things are, in a sense, driven by a subconscious attempt to keep us safe and happy. But if we can discover that within ourselves, which we can, then you find that your life really does transform. And that's what I can honestly say has happened for me, and it's still happening, because there's still more subtle addictions. If you broaden out the definition of addiction to automatic subconscious reactions that aren't serving you. So, for example, thinking, which just happens automatically all the time. It's our go-to to solve problems. It's not actually necessary all the time. How many times has a solution come to you just like that? when you weren't really thinking. But we can worry. We can really overthink. So for me, I'm working on that one, addiction to thinking. And also a more subtle and very powerful addiction is our addiction to ourself. Preferencing ourselves as more important than others. Thinking of ourselves and treating ourselves as special. And of course we are unique. But I'm talking about, special as in better than someone else, not equal. And I think we do, if we're really honest, I think that's what, well, I know I do. And it's an automatic thing. We don't have to beat ourselves up for the state that we discover. I think truth seeking, it is courageous because you do discover things that you consciously don't like to admit are occurring. But it's in opening up to seeing that a realignment occurs. Because when you see some reaction occurring, well, you're also the one seeing, aren't you? So, and then you realize after a while that you who is viewing or seeing is not defined by what is being seen. And so then you start to inquire as into who is it or what is it that is aware, and what are the qualities of that, and that again is, I think, what I would call the awareness pathway, leads to a deeper letting go. And of course, I'm on that journey, and I want to share that journey with you, as I do with my clients. And in a way, this is just an introduction to this way of understanding addiction. So I hope you can see that when we look at addiction, not from the point of view that you're making bad choices, but that your subconscious is actually trying to help you deal with pain and suffering. It's trying to help you be safe and happy. But and you can see that our conscious mind, it's really trying to make up for our conscious mind not having any other solution. But there is another solution. It requires the conscious mind to become more aware. So this leads us very naturally into the awareness pathway. And I often say that when you open up your awareness, it's like turning on a light in a dark room. Not a spotlight, but turning on a bright light, or like the sun coming up. It illuminates everything at once. So when our awareness opens up, it doesn't just illuminate one thing. It'll illuminate a lot of things gradually that haven't been resolved. And so a lot of, this is how, personal transformation occurs, because unresolved things become seen consciously. We don't need to really do a lot with that, because amazingly our whole system has a way of working with that and realigning everything. And I call it ripening and resolving. So it's not about fighting. It's not about fighting your addiction. It's about being more aware of your addiction. So instead of looking at yourself as failing when you try to quit your addiction, it's really that you were not given the right guidance. You were not shown a way that actually truly does get to the heart of addiction. So essentially, you can't. It's not fair to view yourself as failing. It's much more realistic to say that you're on a journey of awakening, a journey of becoming more aware, a journey of becoming more whole. And this is, I suppose, my mission and my passion and purpose, and why I wanted to create this channel is to share this, because it really, I know the suffering. Well, obviously I don't know everybody personally, but I know a lot of the extent of the suffering that is caused by addiction, and I hate the fact that our systems and our lack of understanding is making that even worse. So if we can make a difference, if we can help in any way change that direction, and if you can hear this, and if this makes a difference to you, then I'd like to walk this journey with you. So, and I'm walking it as well. So, if you do want to know more about what I've been doing over the last 15 years or so, there's a link to my website, truequit.com, in the description, and I have courses and a community. But the next video is going to be the 6 traps keeping you addicted, and it will be from this awareness pathway point of view. So if that's you, see you there when it's posted, and I'll love to hear from you, and I will look forward to growing this community and sharing this journey together. Okay, bye for now.